Hi, I'm the True Eyes Gamer, giving off my vast knowledge so you may understand games a bit better. Licensed games are a weird thing to talk about since they're always based on, well, licensed material, and also being notoriously bad. But today we have a weird thing we're going to talk about. But before that, let's actually talk about the license it's based on, Gintama. Gintama was a manga series that was a comedy series that both take itself too seriously and was too silly at the same time, without actually losing what made it funny to begin with. While being creative at making jokes, it did have a habit of being repetitive at times, with repeating a lot of the same gags at times, with the same characters being too often used for the same joke, like this guy right here, whose life is a sham, but at the same time, it's like not deserved anymore, like come on. Or the joke of Zoro being a mayo freak. I know what I said, and it's more funny to think it that way. Anyway, it's about these three doing random jobs as they get into random situations. Except later on where that kind of gets dropped for a little bit because of story reasons, but that's another day. Maybe. And the show really does make good use of this. The main trio are never truly flat and are always fun to watch. You have Gintoki, the bizarre owner slash deadbeat of Odd Job Gin, where most of the antics spawn from, though it's vastly helped with the world now being controlled by the Amanto or aliens. Oh yeah, there are aliens in this show, by the way. While they are important for certain parts, for the most part they are kinda underutilized. Hell, even the show comments on this a bit. It's that self-aware at times. But let's quickly comment on the war. Basically, it's supposed to mimic a historical event that forced open the borders of Japan since they were very isolationalist. And after their borders were open, it became more of a modern center, but with some of the trappings of Edo Japan still. However, samurais and old relics like that were thrown out, and Gintoki, who was also a samurai at the time, mostly adapted due to his weird code of, I'll do whatever the hell I want. Then you have Shinpachi, the straight man to everyone's joke, which is funny at times, but it feels like they pull that joke way too often where he's also the coward and also the simple guy, even though they show him to be more than that. The only other joke they have for him is being an idol fan for a particular girl who curses a lot in her songs, like a lot, and they even kept that in the game, which I'll get into more in a moment. It's just that I feel like he could have been more funny if they were able to do more with him. And lastly, we have Kagura, the alien girl with superhuman strength, with an endless stomach, who can at times be a little bratty at times, but is overall still funny, and if I had to consider who was the funniest, it would be Kagura, who also has funny times with her dog too, Sadaharu, who is funny at times but rarely does anything. When it's funny, it is just funny, and sometimes it just does need to hold back on a joke to be truly awesome at times. But no joke, I still think it's a great series that you should watch. And also having one of the best live action movies of pretty much any anime, which is an actual achievement that is worth praising. Though that doesn't mean it doesn't have its own problems with basically being a repeat of the movie slash arc in the show. Which again, the show made a joke about how they straight up just said the animated movie just the show's episode with a few added scenes. Which it was, by the way. Yeah, Gintama is a really self-aware show at times. Hell, they made episodes about this self-awareness, like making an episode about popularity polls and such. But with all that being said, let's actually talk about what we're going to talk about. Because today we have an oddity since what we have here is a Gintama game that's fully translated into English but was never released outside of Japan for no discernible reasons. Granted, you can buy the physical game online, it's still confusing, which does not help with the also oddity of who made it since I don't usually mention developers unless it's interesting to me, as this game was made by Tamsoft. Which is interesting since they made some of the Onii-Chanbara games, yeah those games, but also the recent excellent Kassen Tsubasa game, which is just good and I would just recommend you buy that game too. But with all that said, let's actually dive into Gintama Rumble. I would begin by actually talking about Gintama Rumble story mode, but it's overall lacking since it's basically just a retelling of certain arcs of the anime with just using panels of the anime to tell most of the story, except some scenes that are beautifully done in engine, which I just have to mention more because holy hell, this game looks good! I have to give special praise to the model work, cause holy crap, it's just so good! The best way I've always tried to explain it to someone of like how good this game looks, you know other anime games where you'll see the models? To me, these models actually look like they're flexible. They're not like these stiff models like, you have to keep them like this. No, they went out of their way to make sure that the models didn't look odd when moving, if that makes sense. Or to give a better example, since I don't have a lot of examples to play off, Sword Art Online. The models there in those games look very flat and stiff, while these, to me, don't. I honestly wish if there is a sequel for this game, I want more done with the engine since, again, it's a damn shame they didn't do more with them. I only say that since the game just uses panels from the anime, and it's also kind of a bad retelling of that, like leaving out certain details that actually make the story more interesting when you know them. The best way to put it is like, you're kind of watching a One Piece arc movie. Basically, yeah, they're fun retellings of those movies with the highlights, but that's all you're getting. Anything else, any of the nuances behind it, not there. And I mean, like, it's not even a good highlight mode. If you really want a game that has a lot of good highlights and shows them off really well, go play Pirate Warriors Free for that, because that game does it perfectly. Honestly, I thought that if they were going to make a story mode for Gintama, I thought they would have likely done like a filler arc thing where it tells its own story for fun. But it doesn't for some reason. And it's really sad if anything because they can make fun filler arcs that have nothing to do with the plot. Oh, they can make a joke about how this is non-canonical, just for fun. And honestly, I don't think I would even have that much of an issue with the game story mode if it didn't also end on an anticlimactic FUD. It just flat out ends. Yeah, they make a joke about it, but that's not really much of an excuse. It only annoys me because, say you do care and you just end like this. Like what? The best way to put this story mode is just that it's going through the motions with not much effort. Literally watching the anime or manga would be a better experience, but to be fair to the game is pretty good, barring those issues I just mentioned. So let's talk about that. This Gintama game decided to actually go for a Musou style game, you know the type, where you face hundreds of enemies that are really easy to fight except for the bosses with the use of a light and heavy attack. Though this game has a lot of differences that make it unique in its own way. One of these is by actually after leveling up, you can give them an attack that they can do by holding one of the attack buttons, which is really useful, and I kinda wish it gets passed on to other Musou games because it allows for more moves to be used in general. And it actually does borrow from one of the other Musou games, the Samurai Warrior games to be in particular. Basically, once you fill up your bar, you can actually press the circle button to unlock your next bar. And while in this one, your stats are somewhat increased, and you'll be able to actually use your finishing move, which has a cut-in where you can actually customize it, which, it's not that interesting, but it's nice to have. You can also get a special attack after reaching another level, which can be done after filling a bar, that fills up depending on this icon here. For a few examples, Gintoki can use the Kamehameha when he knocks a few enemies out of the way, with his strong attack mostly. Or Oga's, I can't ever pronounce his name right, so I'm just saying it like that, who built his special with combos. Which, speaking on combos for a moment, they can also help build your awakening bar, which, you know, is helpful depending on your character's sprite flare thing right here, as long as you don't use combo finishers or your skills, or basically holding down the attack. Another thing that I gotta have to actually praise for this game is that none of the characters are a copy of one another. Well, I mean, like, there is one, but I'll get to that in a moment. See, usual Musou style games try to actually make most of the characters interchangeable with small differences. This game makes sure that all the characters are very different. For example, Gintoki is a very more offensive character, but his stats are more generally well-rounded, while Senpachi's more about simple strikes and damage, while also still being an all-rounder, or Gintoki's more moving forward while dealing damage, while Senpachi's more of like standing his ground. Or Kagura, who's more about air attacks which deal more damage for her, though she can't move as well. Heck, even her Yado form plays different. which overall more powerful, it has a slow start, making it hard-pressed to use at times. The only sad thing I could say is that why didn't they include more characters, since they did put the models in here for some characters like Jubei, but they only do support attacks, which let's talk about that for a moment. The game uses a silver orb system, which is basically actually a reference to the RPG of the series on the DS, which ironically, it uses the plot of that game for this game's extra mode. Go figure. You can equip up to 3 silver orbs at any time, and orbs have 2 functions: an active ability that can be used in battle by selecting it, and a passive one, like getting a certain stab bonus, or, my personal favorite, perpetual healing. This one was the most useful by far, especially when you combine it with abilities like you deal more damage but also take more damage, which really does help get you S ranks on certain missions. Getting an S rank isn't that hard, basically it just requires you to do it fast, do the achievements in the missions, unless you already did them, then you're good and you don't have to do them again, and take no hit. As long as you do those, you're perfectly fine. And actually one of the things I forgot to mention was that there is a useful mechanic in the game. You see, in free play mode, you can actually bump up the difficulty of certain missions. The one you see right now is actually pretty easy. All you need to do is not get hit and you'll be fine. Plus, with all the difficulty bumps, you boost up your XP by a lot. You can level up like a metric ton, which helps get you all your skills and make sure that you have enough slots for your orbs. Though, speaking on the orb, there is a problem. My biggest problem with the silver orb system is more about collecting them, since it's really annoying, since they only spawn on certain maps and are random. Well, except Kingpin missions on Rumble mode, which I'll get to in a moment, which basically guarantees you a new one every time you do them. That being said, there's over 300 of them. And sadly, most of them aren't that useful, and some of them are just straight up repeats of certain abilities. It's also not helped with there also being free versions of those orbs, which the only big difference is that their active abilities timers is a little shorter. Honestly, the game never really needed them, since they could have made it so much easier by, I don't know, leveling them up through the Pachi orbs, which I never used in game because they are that useless. The only things you use the Pachi orbs for are just to buy stuff from the shop, and there's not a lot on the shop. There is also a minor mechanic the game doesn't talk about, and that being the combos of silver orb, which just gives you an extra ability depending on the orbs you're using. But I never used them because the ones I usually used are just good enough on their own, that using the combos just doesn't seem to be worth it. There is also the chase mechanic, which basically it's supposed to keep up your combo, but you're better off just moving forward and attacking rather than using it because it's that useless. Well, except against bosses, which if you press it at the right time, you'll get a damage bonus. Or if the game needed me to do that for an achievement. Which, speaking on that, I need to mention something about this game now. This game's kinda buggy. Like, damn buggy. It actually has a few known bugs, like if you unlock Kagura Yato form last, it could bug out and you can get the trophy for unlocking all the characters. Or worse, the game could just straight up crash for just looking up achievements for battle. Or just straight up crash. Heck, I actually thought at one point that the game bugged me from preventing actually unlocking Takasugi, which I actually learned after collecting footage that all you need to do is do all the side stories just to get him, which is kind of annoying because I gotta mention this, none of the guides online actually talk about how to unlock him. Like, they say to do this particular part, but not explaining how to get that part to begin with. And I only bring up those small things up because I really genuinely did have a fun time, and I just hope that there is a sequel, because if this is something they could make, I want to see the sequel because, god damn, I think that game would be even better. I mean, like, I can at least say it's better than the Berserk Musou game, which, I mean, it isn't hard, but still. I mean, that game has a roster of 8. This game has a roster of 12, 13 if you unlock Yato form. If I really had to explain the game's problem, I would say it would be the same as the Berserk game, but far lesser, if that makes sense. That being, the game has a lack of content. I mean, for example, I mentioned Jubei before, but that's only because I know she was in 2 arcs, and they could have put that arc in the game, but they didn't, which would have really helped the game's content problem. Because by the end of it, I was asking, where's the rest? And I say that last part as a good and bad thing, that I said, where's the rest, in that sense of, I really do want more, but also more in the disappointed sense of, I thought there would be more. Rumble mode is like, I guess tries to fill in that content black hole, but there's not enough of it to begin with. And they are interesting in some regard, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, like, they even added a few cool gimmicks, or funny gimmicks to say the least. There was a mechanic I didn't bring up, and it's really not much of a thing, but it's something to say. That being the Genpicho slots, or I can't ever pronounce it, they don't actually ever say it in game. Basically, after a while, a certain thing will pop up on screen and tell you to do something. If you do it, you'll get a nice bonus. Whether that be a full HP bonus, or more attack, or the stranger modes like Cielo mode where you unlock Cell. Well, Cellio, but whatever. Or the funny Mosaic mode. Really, when I say that this game is a fan service game, and I mean that in the general sense of like, this is for fans, it's a really, really good one because they added Cello in the game, even though there was no real need to. At the end of the day, sadly, I had to say the game just okay. While the visuals, the gameplay are pretty damn good, the game content-wise is very lacking, and I'm sad to say that, as I did have a lot of fun. So, if you're interested and you come in knowing that, you'll have fun and have a good old time. And well, since we talked about a good licensed game, let's actually talk about a bad licensed game. With a series that, again, not a lot of people would know, but let's talk about it anyway.